We're on the brink, folks. The breakdown starts now. Good evening and welcome to The Breakdown. I'm Tara Setmayer. This is the Rick Wilson. And we have a pretty serious show for you tonight. There's a lot of serious things going on in the world, including we are on the brink of a potential Russian invasion into Ukraine. This is something that none of us want to see. This is really, really bad. And we have a great guest tonight to talk about what this means. And some of the messaging around this has been really fascinating, Rick. We have Julia Davis, who is a Russian media expert. She's a columnist for the Daily Beast. She has done intrepid work translating what's going on in Russian state media and also what's going on here in the US and how there's a significant amount of propaganda, pro-Russian propaganda coming out of our media, Rick, particularly Fox News. Surprise,
I'm
surprise.
shocked to hear you say that, Tara. That's absolutely. Who could have seen that one coming?
Right, huh? Whoever would have thunk it? Well, it's happening, and Julia is going to be with us to break that all down. So stay tuned. She'll be with us in a few. But before we get to that, it is still Black History Month, and we have an excellent historical figure to highlight this evening before we get into everything else. It is Robert Smalls. Now, I have to admit, I was unfamiliar with Robert Smalls, Rick, so this was a history lesson for me too. But he was he was born into slavery, but he eventually freed himself. But he did so many amazing things. First of all, when he was in South Carolina, and over the years, he learned how to captain a ship, basically. And he was so determined to be free because he was like, I'm not doing the slavery thing. He actually stole a Confederate ship. He was able to gain the trust of some of the Confederate soldiers. And because he was, they thought he was one of them, and he gained their trust, but he had the idea of, I'm going to steal this ship and get it, to the Union. And he did. And he was able to free some of his fellow slaves along with it and free his family because he was worried. He didn't want his family to end up in more slavery. So this was a huge asset for the Union. And it turned things around. And he went on to be this unbelievable hero. And then he ran for Congress and won in a district that was 70% Black at the time. But in the South, you weren't running for office. But post-Civil War, in the Reconstruction era, with the 15th Amendment and all of that, it allowed for African Americans to run for office and win. But then as Reconstruction laws started to kind of fall apart, Democrats were, hell-bent on making sure that this Black man wouldn't hold office anymore, and he eventually lost. But he continued on with his service and his service to the country. And do you know that he got the first Army ship named after him, named after a Black man, the first, Robert Smalls, and it was commissioned in Baltimore Harbor in 2007, I think, which is pretty cool. But an amazing family legacy, and what a hero!
A steamer. It wasn't a
steamer.
That right. At that point, steamships were still at the beginning of their technology. This was not something trivial. This wasn't like luff up, and sail out of the harbor. It was a hell of a process. So really, I love anything that involves piracy. So here we are.
Indeed. And you know what else? Another interesting fact about what the impact of what he did had on Abraham Lincoln, because at the time there were a lot of Blacks that were trying to convince Lincoln, like, listen, let us fight. We know we're not dumb. Let us fight. We can be strategists too. And that demonstrated his abilities. It seems ridiculous now, but that act of what he did demonstrated to Lincoln and others that, oh, look, Black folks can actually do something strategic and fight for their own freedom. And yes, I think we should embrace this. And that, changed things around. And so pretty amazing. Yeah. So check out Robert Smalls, quite the hero. All right. Well, people who aren't heroes, the Republican Party. Rick, this Putin hero worship thing that's going on, and this, why do we care about Russia invading Ukraine, is astonishing. And I think we should show people what's happened in the last week in this week's Last Week in the Republican Party. We'll talk about it on the other side.
Hillary Clinton, Watergate,
Hillary Clinton's emails.
Hillary Rodham Clinton, Hillary.
I would like to see Hillary treated the way OJ is. Hillary
Clinton,
worse than Watergate, literally worse than Watergate,
Hillary Clinton,
Hillary Clinton should be in jail.
Hillary Clinton.
Grab the shiny, flashy distraction and bury the truth.
Our mannequin-in-chief spent yet another day yammering on about Ukraine.
I don't really care what happens to Ukraine one way or another.
What exactly is Ukraine like? What's its government like? Well, it turns out it's not a democracy. It's run by a dictator.
Let's get right to Eminem taking a knee. Why doesn't he go to another country?
The Super Bowl halftime show is almost always kind of a celebration of degeneracy.
In other news, Canada became a dictatorship today.
Sure. Republicans are energized by COVID.
Well, I think everybody wants to be on President Trump's bandwagon, without any question. One of the things I've said to the president is that he gets to decide the future of our party and our country.
Could you be excited about a Speaker Jim Jordan?
You bet I could be excited about Jim Jordan. I think you should be in there as well.
They treat me as if I'm some kind of crazy person, or like I have three horns coming out of my head.
When they lecture you that we've lost the kids and lost people of color and lost women, please, for the love of God, go to CPAC. Look at that audience. It's the most diverse thing you'll ever see.
Endless mandates, an intentional crippling of our economy, an invasion at our border, disrespect of our law enforcement, our soldiers, and our veterans, a failing public education system for our children, the all-out attack on our health, and the slaughter of our precious preborn children.
Sure.
You know, Tara, folks, as we were getting ready for the show tonight, that video was finished up this afternoon, and we didn't have time to include the absolute batshit crazy lunacy of the interview Trump did with Buck Sexton, in which he calls the invasion of Ukraine, terrific and clever, and Putin's so smart, and it's so brilliant. And, as I joked earlier today, it's like someone saying, well, that Hitler may be a bad egg, but he sure sowed the Sudetenland. What for? It's astounding. And, obviously everything that comes down from Trump will iterate through the party. They have now heard the message on Fox very clearly that we're on that we, the conservatives, they're like, it's our position is that it's okay for Putin to do this. We embrace it. We think it's fantastic because he's going to make Joe Biden look weak. Well, I want to address one thing quickly before we bring our guest on, folks. Whenever you hear a Republican say, well, he didn't invade Ukraine when Trump was in charge, that's because he didn't have to buy the milk. The cow was free. Donald Trump adored Vladimir Putin. He praised him constantly. He did things that made Putin's position in Europe stronger. It gave Putin the time and space to build up the capability to do what he's doing right now in Ukraine. He was subservient to Vladimir Putin every single time they had any kind of interaction whatsoever. He did everything he could to destroy NATO, everything he could to weaken the FBI counterintelligence field. This is a president whose ass was so far up Vladimir Putin's his head was so far up Vladimir Putin's ass, I'm surprised he couldn't see daylight past his dentures. This is not even a question. So don't fall for this, this facile rhetorical trick that Republicans are trying to pull at this moment.
And they're still talking about Hillary's emails. Like that should anytime you see the right-wing media and Republicans default to Hillary's emails, that they are scrambling because
Hillary's emails are in a box full of classified documents in Mar-a-Lago.
Exactly. I mean, give me a break. And I have to tell you that watching that campaign ad by that crazy woman with the whip, I mean, it actually made my stomach turn. Like I started to get the willies, like the hair on the back of my neck stood up because it reminded me so much of slavery and overseers. That I looked at that and I said, wow. Like I literally had a physical, visceral reaction to that. It's really weird.
It's tempting to laugh those people off, but they will ratchet that kind of communication up higher and higher.
Well, we see it used to be guns, right? It used to be, walk around with the gun on your hip,
or copy of Obamacare,
but and not like saying that's okay either. I mean, we're a pro Second Amendment household, and we're not afraid of guns. But some of that tough guy imagery was just so absurd. But now it's graduated to whips and very, I don't know. This whole thing is just bad. And let me say something about the Buck Sexton interview. Yeah. I haven't had a chance to see it, but Buck and I used to be colleagues over at the Blaze, and I considered Buck a friend.
Years ago.
Yeah. And I have to say that I'm absolutely and thoroughly disgusted by what Buck has become and what he is sitting there and advocating. He knows better. He fucking knows better. And now he has become part of the problem. And it's shameful, and I'm sorry. It hurts my heart to see it, but he's another one that we can add to the ash heap of people who've sold their souls.
One more thing before we jump. My favorite clip of this week's of Jeff's work on the This Week in the Republican Party was that one piece of Marjorie Taylor Greene. Where she's sitting on the InfoWars set saying, "They treat me like I'm a crazy person."
Right.
And you could there was almost maybe like a synapse in her brain going, almost connecting to the fact that she's on InfoWars.
Right.
Why would people think you're a crazy person if you go on InfoWars? Why would people think you're a crazy person if you spend 80% of your time trolling? I mean, how could that be? Anyway.
That was probably the funniest part of all of it, because it's like, is she that unaware, or is she actually self-aware? I'm not sure, but yeah, she's a piece of work, that one. And people can be rest assured that next week we will have lots to say about CPAC, because CPAC is coming up this weekend, and it's going to be off the chain. It always is. It's getting progressively worse every year, and so
they've got two Nazis on the panel this year speaking. So that's
awesome. Which ones?
Seb Gorka and Jack Posobiec.
Oh, there we go.
Jack Posobiec, he's so clever with his. I've got 14 reasons why 88 people will vote against Hillary Clinton. Oh yeah, those hilarious Holocaust jokes.
Yeah, and I've been
Jack Posobiec.
This is your CPAC people.
Mm-hmm.
Matt Schlapp, you're another one who knows better, and so does your wife. Anyway,
Faye of the conservative movement.
Say it again, Rick.
They're the Jim and Tammy Faye of the conservative movement.
Yes, indeed. Oh my God. All right. Well, back to more serious things. We see what's happening with Ukraine. It seems that Vladimir Putin is hell-bent on invading, and he gave a barn burner of a Looney Tunes address yesterday that has a lot of people really alarmed about his state of mind, and none of this is good. And what was American right-wing media doing? They were either ignoring it or saying, what's the big deal, or criticizing Ukraine, for goodness sakes. It is the world turned upside down, and there's no better person to talk about this than our guest tonight, Julia Davis. She is a columnist for the Daily Beast. She's also a Russian media expert and analyst, and we are grateful for your intrepid work keeping the masses educated as to what the hell is actually happening in Russia and what's happening here in the U.S. It's a very strange juxtaposition going on. Strange days. Thank you for joining us, Julia.
Thank you so much for having me. You guys were talking earlier, and it was right on point. And the Russians themselves talk about why they're choosing to do this now, and now not under Trump. They're in their own words, straight from the horse's mouth. They say they were getting what they wanted under Trump. He gave them a 4-year reprieve, so there was no need to do anything. And the only reason they didn't get even more, and they also vocally discussed this on many occasions, is that the Congress and Senate stood in the way, which they are expressing plans to to change, and that's where Tucker Carlson's of this world come in handy.
I'm sure.
Rick, I think we should play the, speaking of Tucker Carlson, Lincoln Project has a rapid response out given all of the propaganda that's coming out of that side of the aisle. So I want to play that and then get your reaction to it, Julia. Here's the latest from Lincoln Project on Russia and Fox.
So for the first time in more than a year, Joe Biden is making border security his top priority. Not our southern border, which has become a playground for drug smuggling cartels, but the border of Russia and Ukraine.
Putin has made very clear all along that their security, in his mind, is what's at stake here.
Ukraine is not even a democracy, despite what Joe Biden endlessly claims. Ukraine is a corrupt Eastern European autocracy.
And Putin has a very good shot of breaking up NATO as a result of this in ways that we can't imagine today.
So today, we sent another letter to Vladimir Putin asking for an interview. We hope we get it.
Vladimir Putin has ordered Russian troops into regions of Ukraine that he claims now are independent. We're going to be monitoring events there. We'll bring you an update shortly. A lot happening on the ground, but to more immediate and serious issues closer to home. Well, Canada continues its descent into tyranny.
Why do I care what's going on in the conflict between Ukraine and Russia? And I'm serious. Like, why do I care? And why shouldn't I root for Russia, which I am?
I mean, how much is Russia celebrating the fact that they now have a vassal state of propaganda here in the United States?
It's beyond their wildest dreams. They're so excited. They're saying that Tucker Carlson is practically their co-host, and that they love what he's saying so much that they don't even bother to come up with their own monologues. They just take clips of Tucker, translate them, and run them uninterrupted for several minutes at a time. Head of RT herself was so impressed with Tucker's efforts that she said Putin needs to sit down for an interview with him. So I guess Tucker's prolonged audition may actually pay off. They are ready to go for it. And if the head of RT is advocating it, it's very likely to happen.
Well, Julia, one of the questions I've been pondering is Putin has given a lot of longer public statements in the last week or 10 days than Americans are usually accustomed to seeing. When he had his cabinet and his senior officials with him for the long show and tell presentation, what was your interpretation of that? Was he playing to a domestic audience, or was he trying to set an international predicate for the invasion? Or was he trying to make sure that everyone knows he's still like the boss in charge, and if you cross him, you die?
It was a bit all of the above, actually. And surprisingly, we never even have right-wing media personalities that are echoing his talking points. I saw Candace Owens is telling people to go read Putin's speech. Right. And it's just laughable because his speech was so twisted, so incorrect. He just basically invented his own version of history. And instead of merely justifying or attempting to justify why they were invading Donbass and getting hold of these breakaway territories, he actually laid out his justification for trying to take all of Ukraine. That speech was beyond disturbing. And on the Russian state TV, they're already talking about how what they're doing now is the first step, which they will wait for the Ukrainian military to provoke them, quote unquote, and laughing about, well, they will provoke us because they are, of course, the ones that are going to stage it. And as far as Putin's speech, that entire performance, it was a pre-recorded reality show where each one of his officials had their little script. They said what was expected. I thought it was interesting that Medvedev got the talking points about how Russia should not fear the Western sanctions. And he spoke about how not much happened after they went into Georgia, not much happened after they took Crimea, and the West will not harm itself, and eventually realize that Russia is bigger and more important than Ukraine, and they will just move on. So that was very interesting, and it seems like Fox News is definitely ready to move on right now and hand over Ukraine to this tyrant as though it was theirs to give.
I think that's definitely one of the questions that as Americans we had a 70-year period where we were in this long struggle with communism and with Soviet communism, and now there was a sort of a generation gap between the fall of the wall and Trump, really, where people stopped paying as much attention to it. And it looks to me that we've got, that Americans need a little bit of education that, Russia is in many ways a third world country with a first world intelligence service and a first world nuclear arsenal, but that, they don't have the economic power to harm the US except by creating chaos.
Exactly. And you really touched upon an important point there. They cannot engage us directly. They only do it then with their hybrid warfare, interfering with our elections. They would not dare to confront us directly. But what they themselves say all the time, that Ukraine is where they fight us. This is what they see as their battle with the United States. And if you're listening to Fox News, they're ready to capitulate.
Yeah, it really, the Fox and the right-wing media enterprise, they seem very desperate to just get this over with, and it's getting harder and harder to tell the bots that Putin deploys with the actual live humans inside the conservative movement today. They've all got the same message these days.
They all got the same talking points, which actually I want to ask you, Julia, have you ever seen anything like this before? When you've been covering this for a long time, and the language that's being used, the blatant propaganda. I mean, before it used to be almost laughable, but now it seems to be mainstreamed. When did you start to see this, and at what point were you alarmed that this was actually having an impact here in the United States?
Well, during the Trump presidency, where he tried to basically normalize Putin and explain him away as someone who's just like us, and he does some terrible things, but so do we. And it's a very dangerous proposition to try to place Putin on the same level. And his obedient minions followed him in that direction and have gone so far off and have totally lost their bearings to where they're now excusing Putin's behavior. So in 2014, I was seeing mainly Russian bots that were fighting these battles. Mm-hmm. Now I'm seeing them joined by Americans, which is completely dangerous. And what is even more dangerous is that the likes of Tucker Carlson are actually telling people whom to vote for or not to vote for, telling people not to vote for Republicans that would dare to oppose Russia, which is exactly what Russia wants. And so guess who they're going to meddle on behalf of in the next election? They're already saying they want to bring Trump back. They openly say it on their state TV that they miss him. They want him back. They expected much more. He couldn't deliver, but they are hoping that with this wedge that they're driving through the Republican Party and the conservative media, they might get such a foothold that the entire foreign policy of the United States will change. And this will no longer be America as we ever knew it. And the Russians are already calling it the New World Order, where America will be pushed aside and Russia will take its place and do what it wants. And no one will be able to tell it what's right or wrong. They will decide for themselves. And you can see on the basis of Putin's actions that he would not use it for good things.
Well, they can have him. They miss Trump so bad, we'll ship him over. I'll pay for the ticket.
But you know what? They don't want him there.
Oh, I know.
Because Putin despises traitors. He's happy to use them, but he has no respect for them whatsoever. So whoever is acting like a traitor to their nation, sure, they'll use him. He's a useful tool, but they would never respect him or see him as anywhere on their own level. So that's why they had no trouble mocking Trump or Marjorie Taylor Greens of this world, because they have zero respect for them. They don't care about the good of this nation. So they both despise them and use them at the same time.
True definition of useful idiot.
Julia, one other question I had for you that I think is is important for Americans to understand. The Russians really say a lot of the quiet part out loud on their state media, don't they? I mean, they're not hiding their agenda on their state media. They come out and say what they're going to do. And Americans, I think, believe that there's a sort of like, they believe that in American media, things are at least couched in some vague ideological framework. The Russians are right out there saying it. We're going to invade. We're going to take Ukraine back. We're going to screw up America. We're going to blow up the international order. We're going to destroy NATO. I mean, they're right out there saying it, aren't they?
Yes, they are, and but they have it compartmentalized where they say one sort of things for the domestic audiences in Russian. They say something entirely different through their English language outlets. It wasn't meant to mix. I'm the one mixing it up, and they certainly hate it to the point where people that bring up my name on their broadcast get cut off and not invited again. It's getting under their skin because I'm basically butting into their private conversations and telling the world, here's what they're doing. And it's so blatant that there are actually lawmakers that for months have been talking about their secret plan for Ukraine and laughing that, oh, Ukrainians, soon you will find out, pointing at the Ukrainian in the studio, tell them, you stand there and be afraid. You're going to see what's coming. So it's very blatant, and the same way that they talk about America. And they definitely don't like when it leaks out in the open. It bothers them pretty deeply.
Right.
One of an example of something that you did that they had to respond to directly was this propaganda video which showed like comparing Nazi Germany and genocide and accusing the U.S. I think of being a part of that. Can you talk a little bit about what that was and what happened there?
In 2014, they released one of their many completely despicable videos. It was done by RT, and they essentially were mixing up the footage from the actual concentration camps with the footage of what's going on in Ukraine, trying to equate the two, calling the Ukrainians Nazis, totally baselessly accusing them of genocide, claiming that Ukrainian military is crucifying children and forcing their mothers to watch, just making up outrageous lies, absolutely outrageous lies. And back then is when I started my series called Russia Lies, where I would take 20 of their most outrageous lies. I would debunk them. And actually, I had this stamp with the word fake that I would put on them. They stole my idea. Now, Russia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs uses a stamp like that on what they want to debunk in Western media. So, but, you know, they're known for that sort of thing. They love to steal things. So once I debunked that, it was just so outrageous that they pulled that entire episode, which of course I had already saved by that time. So when the Biden administration released some of this declassified intel that the Russians were planning to create fake videos and blame Ukraine for things they didn't do, it fit right in with what they were already doing. In the past, they had created videos of a pregnant woman and her husband allegedly being hanged, which was totally fake beginning to the end. Another one where they did actors playing parts and claimed that ISIS had a camp in Ukraine where they were training. Totally just reenactments and nothing real about it. And other video where they had this man that was on the cross and allegedly a fire said to him, just one fake upon the next. But unfortunately, at that time, other than my efforts to shine a light on it, there wasn't a whole lot being done in the media to expose it. So to a lot of people, they might think that that sounds like an Alex Jones InfoWars territory. But in reality, that's the Russians' bread and butter. This is what they do. They don't even excel at it, which is fortunate for us, which makes those videos pretty easy to debunk, like the recent ones that they had released that were actually pre-filmed before the so-called events reportedly even happened. They're sloppy, which is to our benefit, but it's up to our media to expose it every time that they're caught.
Yep. We're grateful that you do. You've been a great resource for me, and I I think it's important for people to understand at this point, as they're watching this all unfold, why should Americans care? I ask this of all of our Russian, Ukrainian foreign policy experts, because I think it's hard for the American people to really grasp why this is so bad. We're horrified. You understand it. But to the average viewer, they're going, oh, well, we don't need to be in another war. That's over there in Europe. I mean, yeah, Russia's going to Russia. Putin's going to Putin. Why should we care? I think you can lay it out for the average casual viewer. Why is this so important?
This is Putin's war on democracy. And if we lose in Ukraine, we lose everywhere, because he's not going to stop. He's not constrained by the borders. I'm sure you heard Putin say Russia's borders end nowhere. And he's encroaching upon countries and continents. They're in Africa, they're in Latin America. They want to be everywhere, and they want to dominate. So either they will dominate or we will. With our vision of democracy and protecting fledgling democracies that are trying to be free. So it's a much bigger thing than just Ukraine. And actually, the Russians are counting on Americans not caring. They love to replay those clips of Tucker Carlson calling Ukraine the largest country entirely in Europe a tiny, corrupt nation. They love to replay that, even though they know it's a lie. And they also replayed the parts where he claimed it's not really a democracy. Well, it's not a perfect democracy, but look at us. Neither are we. There is no such thing as a perfect democracy, but they are striving and trying, and we need to make sure that they don't fail.
Agreed with that completely. Well, Julia, thank you so very much for being with us today. I cannot tell you how much we value the work that you do, and that you joined us here to share with the LPTV viewers some insights on how this massive propaganda war that we're in works. Really appreciate your time today.
Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate you having me.
Thank you, Julia. I really, really encourage folks to follow her at Julia Davis News. She is
amazing,
an incredible resource. And if you have any interest in seeing what actually is going on the ground there in Russia and what they're being told versus what's really happening, it's night and day. It is night and day. And you think, how do they get away with this? Social media, we know it has its flaws, and we complain about it a lot, but it's also allowed people to see the other side of it too, in ways that we wouldn't have been able to
someone
before.
like Julia, who's got a very narrow, you would think it's a very narrow audience for this kind of information, but it is actually a vital audience for this information.
Yes.
We need American opinion leaders and elected officials and people who are activists and folks like our group. Without Julia, we'd have to sort of try to deconstruct this. And we've got a lot of friends who are Russia experts, but she gets to the heart of what they're really after and what they're doing and how they're playing the game with us. So it's an enormously valuable insight. And I met her. We met at a conference in Canada a few years ago, and I was like, God damn, she's smart.
Yes.
So,
and at great personal risk, they just like all of us, it's not, it's not an easy business to be in when you speak out against the powers that be who are so corrupt and nefarious. So we applaud her.
Indeed.
Well, that is it for us on this edition of The Breakdown. Be sure to check out our sister show. We're speaking tomorrow, Wednesday at 7, and Thursday we have friend of the show, Ruth Ben-Ghiat. She's a historian. She wrote the book Strong Men. She's another badass woman who's super smart, that tells it like it is. And she will be with us here to talk about Putin's allies and, more deconstruction of what's going on here, because obviously the story isn't going away. This is going to be a long-term issue for us here in the United States, not only in Europe. It affects us here too. So make sure you join us again on Thursday with Ruth, and next week, of course, will be CPAC week. So there's that, but we'll see you on Thursday. And one last thing.
Yes.
Guess who has an Instagram account?
Tell me.
Tiki.
Yes.
I've heard everyone, they want more Tiki. So there will be Tiki time on Instagram.
I love this.
Yes, you can follow Tiki at Tara's Tiki Cat. It's on Instagram. You see Tiki has things to say. We'll have some Tiki time things there. There'll be some pictures, so it's a window into the life of the Teekster. So
I love
be sure
that.
to follow him. Yeah, I've heard the masses. Tiki finally said, "What's going on, Mom? Let's do it."
You got to listen to the people.
You know what happened? We did a video for NBC Think.
I saw that. Yeah, it was great.
So they asked me to do a video with Tiki because the piece I wrote on Pence got such a response that they were like, let's see Tara's cat. So we're like, all right, one take. You can go to the Instagram. You can see the video with Tiki. His debut was fantastic. I think I might put him in movies. So, so you can follow Tiki Time at Tara's Tiki Cat on Instagram. All right, guys, we'll see you on Thursday.